Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. That was a game, I guess. The Lakers fell 125-108 to drop to 15-5 at the 20-game mark. They remain on a 61 win pace, but their 7-game win streak is snapped in embarrassing fashion. They are dominated on both sides of the ball by the Phoenix Suns, and it's the 5th time this season that the Lakers have lost by double digits. Every single loss has been by double digits, and the last 3 have been by 15 plus. So when the Lakers lose, when they just don't have it for a given night, they often are getting thoroughly outclassed. We have a lot to touch on. First and foremost, shout out to the chat. You guys are troopers. You guys are real ones. Shout out to the late night gang. For those of you who tuned in, who watched the full game, who continued watching into the 4th, who are tuning in now, I appreciate it. And you guys, I don't know if you're sadistic or what, but we have some positives kind of to touch on, or at least some lessons, right? Wisdom and lessons, right? That's what we do here. But quick shout out to Justin for becoming a member. I appreciate it. Shout out to Justin. All right, let's get into it. So Buha's big picture, which I had switched the overarching thought to big picture last season, and I just kind of forgot about it, to be honest. And now we are bringing back Buha's big picture. Couldn't think of a better game to do Buha's big picture for. Buha's big picture is a slice of humble pie. And it's the holiday season, so I felt it was appropriate to do a pie analogy here. But the Lakers have been playing objectively good basketball over the past couple of weeks, and I think it's reflected in the results. The 7-game win streak, them maintaining a top 2 spot in the West. And during that 7-game win streak, they had the number 2 offense and the number 12 defense. They had the number 2 net rating at just over plus 14 points per 100 possessions. So objectively, the Lakers were playing good basketball entering tonight's game. However, at the same time, the Lakers have had some bad habits that we have touched on in some of these wins. And sometimes people maybe felt that it was a little bit too critical of, hey, they won the game or whatever. Like, don't be harping on negative things. But the fact of the matter was I was concerned with this type of game or this type of performance where if you get away with bad habits for an extended period, when you play an actual good team, and the Suns are a good team this season, that they've been a good team up to this point, you get smacked in the face and you don't really know what to do. So the Lakers lose tonight, 125-108. I don't even think I'd mentioned the score yet, but they lost by 17. And really it was around that 20, low 20s for most of the 3rd into the 4th. And just, the Suns were killing them. And there's a lot of factors that go into this loss, right? So Lakers, 2nd night of a back-to-back, 3rd game in 4 nights. JJ said post-game he felt they had brain fog. And he was kind of saying it in jest, but he was like, it felt like the Monstars took the powers of his players and he did not recognize the players that he had been coaching, and just they're going under screens and leaving shooters. And he said there was multiple game plan errors, specifically with their 3-point defense. And for those who listened to the Lakers Collective podcast earlier today or saw me on NBA TV, I did an NBA TV hit. The thing I keyed in on for this game in both of those interviews today, or both of those media appearances, was the Lakers' 3-point defense against the Suns, because the Lakers have some really bad habits with their soft switching, with their rotations, and often non-rotations to corner shooters, weak side shooters. And I thought that allowed the Suns to get into an early offensive rhythm that then they rode into some ridiculous shot making, right? Like that's the other part of this is I think multiple things can be true. Second night of a back-to-back, 3rd game in 4 nights. in some ways like a schedule loss kind of. In other regards, like Suns check a lot of the boxes of a team that gives the Lakers problems. Athletic. They actually don't play that fast if you look at their pace going into tonight, but they are very active defensively. They lead the league in steals. They had 16 steals tonight. Were able to generate a bunch of fast break and transition opportunities. So a handsy team, a quick team, a team with a lot of speed and perimeter defensive capability that JJ actually compared to OKC pregame. And that was when my antenna started to go off a little bit of like, if he's comparing them to OKC and we saw how OKC was able to manhandle the Lakers, in some ways this mirrored that, obviously not to the same extent because they're not as good as OKC, but there were shades of the OKC loss in this loss. And then, the third, so again, the schedule part of it, the Suns actual matchup part of it. And then the third thing, like, sure, Colin Gillespie is turned into Steph Curry or Damian Lillard just hitting off the dribble contested threes. Dylan Brooks is looking like Kobe or MJ in the post, just with his little shimmy moves and he's hitting these turnaround contested jumpers. Like there was an element of shot making that was clearly like unsustainable and just it was Phoenix's night. Up and down the roster, it was Phoenix's night. So I think multiple things can be true in a loss. Like anytime there's a loss, I think a lot of people look for the scapegoat, look for the one reason they lost. And again, I think the schedule had something to do with it. The Lakers clearly seemed tired, especially to start the game. And then that just continued. This is not a great matchup for them in terms of play style. And then also an element of shot making. And then we have to look at the Lakers side of LeBron had maybe the worst game I've ever seen him play as a Laker. I don't think that's a crazy thing to say when you look at 10 points, 0 rebounds, 3 assists for LeBron. And he just got those 10 points early in the fourth quarter, which was a storyline at that point. Rui has a Tony Snell performance, he and DeAndre Ayton get benched early in the third quarter because of how bad they were collectively defensively. And JJ changes the rotation, pulls both of those guys in, puts Jackson Hayes and Maxi Kleba. But Rui took 1 shot, 0 points, 1 rebound, zeros across the board. Otherwise, I'm kind of bleeding into notable performers. I don't want to go down the entire roster. Austin did not have a good game. Luka had a good counting stats game, but 9 turnovers. So again, I don't want to go into each individual player yet, but like collectively the Lakers just did not show up tonight the way that they needed to. It was an unserious performance, and you factor in the schedule and some tired legs, you factor in the opponent and their playing style, you factor in the opponent's hot shooting and shot making, and then you also factor in the Lakers' poor play and inability to take care of the ball and get back in transition and just rotate at all. That is a perfect recipe for a blowout loss, and that's what we saw tonight. So to bring it back to the humble pie, I think this should be a wake-up call for the Lakers that this was over this stretch now of 8 games, the 7 wins, and now this game. It's only the second team they've played that was above 500, with the other one being Milwaukee, which was one of their best wins of the season. But like the Lakers need to learn from this, and they need to kind of reframe how they approach some of these games, because to get back to like the bad habits part, like they had a lot of bad habits, even just going back to last night against New Orleans with how they closed that game, started the game great, had a professional first quarter, and then don't even take my word for it, take JJ's word for it, did not show up defensively for the final 3 quarters and sort of mailed it in and just coasted. And they had a 19-point lead in the first, so it was enough to get by against New Orleans. And we've seen stretches of that, some of the Dallas stretches, some of the Clippers stretches, some of the Jazz stretches. Like the Lakers have not been playing anywhere close to 48 minutes of good basketball. And they haven't even really been playing even close to 24 minutes in some of these wins. So I think some of those trends, some of those habits, some of the bad habits came back in terms of not trying their hardest defensively and just not playing serious basketball. And when you're playing lottery teams, that's okay. And you can win those games. And you can have your 6 and 8 and 12-point wins. But when you're playing a real team, a team that's been one of the surprises of the season, a team that's in that playoff mix for the 6 or 7 seed, this is what happens. And so I don't want to overreact. And I know there's a lot of overreaction right now. People are crashing out. I get it. It feels like everyone crashes out after every Lakers loss because they lose in such convincing fashion. But I think, again, that's something I talked about after the Atlanta loss. It's something I talked about after the OKC loss. Like, this team's floor is probably lower right now than it should be. And really the only benefit or the only positive to tonight was that Denver lost to Dallas. Watched the first half of that game, but they lost by 10. 80 had a big game. Ryan Nembhard cooked them with 28 and 10. So Denver loses, and then Houston loses to Utah. So both of those teams lost to teams that they shouldn't have lost to. For what it's worth, it was Denver's first double-digit loss of the season. Their first 5 losses were all by single digits. For Houston, it was just their second double-digit loss of the season. So point being, I think with like those 2 teams lost, so that's good for the Lakers in the standings battle and just further ground for OKC that they have so much cushion right now at the top of the West. But like, I think the Lakers still continue to show that the floor is low. Like, their ceiling, I think, is on par with Denver and Houston, but their floor is they just get blown out in some of these games in a way that I think the talent and skill and roster should not be blown out. Like, I think this team should be too good to be blown out by 20 to this Suns team. And one thing I didn't even mention, Suns were without Jalen Green. Lakers were without Marcus Smart. But they lost Devin Booker after the first quarter. Devin Booker left the game with a groin strain. And again, Dillon Brooks turned into some Kobe MJ hybrid, hitting every jumper imaginable. 33 points on 15 and 26 shooting. Colin Gillespie, 28 points. Absolutely. I mean, he looked like Steph Curry out there. He, just cooking. I mean, I actually had some like Chris Paul moves and stuff. Like he was awesome tonight. But like Mark Williams, I thought had some really nice minutes. Jordan Goodwin, Lakers familiar with him. He was cooking guys off the dribble. Royce O'Neal had 11 assists, and he was also cooking people off the dribble and really excelling in the driving kick game. So, I mean, just the fact that, that's another element for me is like, it's one thing to lose to the Suns, but to lose without Devin Booker for the final 3 quarters, and that's actually one Phoenix won on the run. That's just a really tough loss for LA. But in the big picture, I don't want to overreact. I don't think this is like some referendum on the Lakers. Like, I'm seeing already the narrative, Lakers are fake. They can't beat any good teams. Like, that's not true. But this is a reminder that they have to come correct with the requisite mindset and the requisite focus and seriousness. And when they are playing in New Orleans, when they are playing in Utah, when they are playing these lottery teams, they need to take it more seriously for longer stretches. Like that has been my concern, is like, to beat OKC, you need 40 to 42 really good minutes. You could probably have a couple stretches in there where it's not great and you could be okay. The Lakers right now are not close to putting together 40 to 42 good minutes as a team. And that's why I think there is a sizable gap between them and OKC. Doesn't mean they can't get there, but to get there, it's like, putting in time in the gym. You got to work at it, and you got to put in those hours in terms of time under tension and working your way up to a certain weight. And for LA, I think to work their way up to a certain weight, they need to take stretches of these games more seriously. And I think some of the bad habits from the win streak caught up to them tonight. So that is my big picture takeaway. In terms of notable performers, we have to start with Luka Doncic, 38 points, 11 rebounds, and 5 assists. I don't want to say Luka had a bad game, because objectively 38 points, 11 rebounds, and 5 assists is incredible and impactful. Was also efficient, 15 to 26, just 3 of 8 on threes, but 5 of 5 on free throws. Did not get the same whistle that he is accustomed to, and you could tell that bothered him at times. Also bothered Austin Reeves. Only went 1 for 1 at the free throw line for Austin, but Luka did have 9 turnovers and was a starting lineup worse and a team worse, minus 25 in terms of plus minus when he was on the floor. So that. Like the Suns went on runs. Like the Lakers have actually been pretty good with Luka on the floor this season, and it's been the non-Luka minutes that have been concerning. And it's sort of like the blueprint to beating the Lakers is at least keep the Luka minutes close, and then when Luka's off the floor, try to like dominate those minutes. Tonight was the opposite, where the Lakers actually won the non-Luka minutes slightly and got crushed in the Luka minutes. Of course, there's a lot of randomness in that, and it's just Suns went on some runs while he was on the floor, but it was an odd game because, again, like the counting stats, you look at it, 38, 11, and 5 is a positive, but I thought Luka, I mean, the turnovers were the Suns, like he was telegraphing passes and you're just really struggling with ball control. And then I also thought defensively, and really for me, this has been a couple games in a row, I think including the New Orleans game, where Luka's transition defense and getting back after misses or non-calls has been a bit problematic. So he was not the most of the Lakers' problems tonight. They had several guys and several factors that were bigger issues than just Luka, but he had over a third of their turnovers and nearly double the next player in Austin. So like the turnovers were a real issue, and that did create a lot of transition up, offense and opportunity for Phoenix. Speaking of Austin, again, like 16, 4 and 3, 6 of 12, shooting 3 of 7. So like he was efficient, but he had 5 turnovers to 3 assists. So you never want to see that. Similar to Luka, like almost double the amount of turnovers compared to assists. But just I thought he struggled at times with having Gillespie or Goodwin or Dunn. And this is another, like when we evaluate Austin, this continues to be a thing of how does he perform against these types of teams? And with JJ comparing this Phoenix team to OKC, and this being one of the teams that excels in ball pressure, excels with speed and athleticism and pressuring full court, this was not the best Austin performance. I mean, this was probably his second worst game of the season from a statistical perspective outside of the OKC game. And the obvious trend there was the personnel. So this continues to be something that Austin is going to have to navigate and overcome, is like, how can he excel more against these types of teams? Because the Lakers certainly needed more. And again, he had an efficient offensive night from like a scoring perspective, but he has taken a step back since LeBron has returned as a playmaker, and I think LA needed a little bit more of that tonight. DeAndre Ayton, 12 points, 9 rebounds, was pseudo benched with Rui. Again, benching is a strong term, but those two were yanked earlier than usual. Ayton typically plays deeper into the quarter. So does Rui, but they both got yanked after a timeout. JJ brought in Maxi Kleba and Jackson Hayes. Ayton, I thought was like solid tonight. He was fine to solid in most regards. The Lakers had a lot of success with him as a trailing into those 12 to 16 foot jumpers in early offense situations, or he'd set a high screen and then trail into those little opportunities. So he was effective in that regard. I think, especially in comparison to the New Orleans game, there was a clear drop off defensively. And then in terms of compared to Mark Williams, I thought Mark Williams really stood out with his athleticism running the floor, and his athleticism popped in contrast to DeAndre Ayton's, just the athleticism and energy, the motor. And what's interesting is both guys have had motor issues in terms of their reputation, and sort of the knocks on them have been their motor. And at least for tonight, I thought Mark Williams had some more impressive motor moments, say that 5 times fast, against DeAndre Ayton. But again, Ayton was solid. I don't want to put this on Ayton by any means. Again, Rui, Tony Snell, 0 points, 1 shot, missed it, 1 rebound. He was part of the unit that got pulled early in the third, came back in the fourth, and was just kind of out there. And, I don't really have much else to say about that. And then LeBron, I'm going to touch on him a little bit more, but 10 points, just barely got it. Got to the free throw line, made 1 free throw, and then hit that 3 at the top of the arc. The Lakers are clearly trying to keep his streak alive. 1,297 games. I believe January 7th, 2005 was the last time. Sorry, January 5th, 2007 was the last time LeBron did not score in double figures. So Lakers wanted to keep that going. I guess that's another bright spot for them. them. Off the bench, like Jake LaRavia, I liked some of his defensive possessions on Devin Booker and Dylan Brooks, but continues to miss good looks and, has been pretty inconsistent offensively. And I think that continues to limit his ceiling right now and his overall value. Jackson, like, it's interesting coaching against or going up against Jordan Knott. He was obviously a Lakers assistant for a couple of years under Darvin Ham. So he's familiar with these guys. And the game plan appeared to be like, just go at Jackson. And I was surprised by that because you saw with DeAndre in there, especially like that, like first quarter, they were much more jump shot heavy and were not testing DeAndre in terms of dribble penetration and trying to get to the rim. When it was Jackson in there, I believe the first two plays Jackson's in there, or two of the first like 3 or 4 possessions, they went right at Jackson and scored. And it was clear that part of the game plan was like, we don't fear this dude as a rim protector, even though Jackson has been a better rim protector and I think overall better defender this season. Phoenix was able to attack him a bit, and then also with their switching and swarming, like they were able to negate him offensively. Gabe, 1 for 6 shooting, 1 for 4 on threes, continues to both force shots and miss good looks. I did not think it was his sharpest performance. Dalton Connect, I like to call him a garbage time all-star because in the competitive portion of this game before the Lakers pulled the bench, he had 5 points, ends up with 13. He always does well in those minutes, but like, hey, he got the Lakers helped their point differential and net rating. And then Maxi Kleba had one very slow motion runner. It might have it made Luka look like Usain Bolt with how slow he had a drive and that like little runner when he came in. But he 5 points and 3 rebounds in 10 minutes. And then the rest of the guys, Bronny, Nick Smith, and Adu all played in garbage time, which was the final 6 minutes of the game. In terms of stat of the night, I have 3 and they're all terrible. 32 points off of turnovers for Phoenix, off of LA's 22 turnovers. We could make 22 turnovers another stat of the night. 28-2 in fast break points. Like that is mind-bogglingly bad. 28-2 in fast break points and 16 steals for Phoenix. So looking at it, Mark Williams, 2 steals, Colin Gillespie, 2 steals, Brooks 1, O'Neal 1, Ryan Dunn 2, Iguodala 1, Goodwin 1. Dunn 2, Iguodala 1, Goodwin 3, Nigel Hayes Davis 1, and I can't, Jamari, I can't, is it Buha? Buha? He had 3 steals. He was awesome tonight. But his last name gives me trouble. So yeah, I mean, they just eviscerated the Lakers on that end of the floor, and that was really the game. The Lakers could not make cross court passes or cross paint passes against this team, and really struggled. There was a lot of uncharacteristic turnovers in terms of like literally just Luka, Austin, and LeBron dribbling the ball like off their foot, or just dribble, like just simple stuff that it was really jarring to see how many unforced and or just like shooting themselves in the foot for no apparent reason turnovers the Lakers had. And then going to go through the 3 takeaways quickly before we get into the Q&A here. First one is the blueprint to beat the Lakers. And what I mean by that is I do think we now have seen some trends in the Lakers' losses, and I think it's important to know how to beat the Lakers so we know what the Lakers need to work on and what they need to address in terms of the roster potentially at some point down the road here. So if we look at the commonalities between the Warriors loss, the Blazers loss, the Hawks loss, the Thunder loss, and tonight's loss against the Suns, the first thing that like comes to my mind is speed and athleticism. And I think in all 5 losses, like the Portland one, I put to the side, no Luka, no LeBron, second night of a back-to-back. Austin dropped 51 the night before. It's like, okay, they Nick Smith, Bronny were playing like real rotation minutes in that game. Portland is under 500 now, but has had some really impressive wins. They beat Denver. They beat OKC. They've had close games against really good teams. Like Portland has been a solid team to start the season, and at the time they were above 500. So the Portland game I almost put in like its own category of like, there's no such thing as like a good loss, but the Portland game to me is the most like, it's probably the best loss of the season or the most justifiable. So I kind of put Portland to the side, although Portland does check some of these boxes. But looking at Golden State and Portland and Atlanta and OKC and Phoenix, speed and athleticism stood out. There was a real disparity between the Lakers and those teams in each of those matchups. All of those teams pressured the Lakers to some extent in terms of full court pressure and even half court pressure. Remember the Warriors, trapping the Lakers a lot around half court. And there's an element of trapping and blitzing, but also having the speed to recover in those 4-on-3, 3-on-2 situations. So athleticism, speed, and ball pressure have been some of the trends in LA's losses. And in all of the losses, they've struggled to some degree with their shooting, making teams pay for playing off of certain guys or playing so aggressively. They've also struggled with turnovers, and teams have, those teams have been able to speed up their processing, their decision making, and it has led to an array of turnovers for LA. So I think as we look forward for the Lakers in terms of like what to learn from this game, clearly they need to figure out how to handle ball pressure better and the ways to counter that. And I think, again, like we've seen against the Clippers or against the Mavericks or against like certain teams, against Utah, they have excelled in that 4-on-3, 3-on-2, but there wasn't as much of a disparity. Like when they're facing a team that is clearly more athletic than them and faster than them at multiple positions and excels at pressuring the ball and maybe doubling and then veering back and just kind of mucking up the game with their defensive style, the Lakers have struggled and they need to figure that out because, again, like you can now almost like when you can almost envision the type of defense that gives the Lakers problems. And unfortunately, the best team in the league and the Lakers' biggest competition plays that exact type of defense. And again, if the Lakers played like they did tonight against OKC, I mean, it might have actually been a worse performance, at least over the final three quarters, than like that OKC game. I don't know. It's probably close, but like probably lose by 40 tonight to OKC. So I think like there's only so much they could do, right? You're not going to get faster. You're not going to get more athletic. That is a real limitation with this roster. But I think the Lakers really need to dive into the film and sift through some of the trends in terms of the consistent ways they turn the ball over and figure out ways to counter that. And I think maybe it is playing Luka or Austin off the ball a little bit more. And now that you have LeBron, leveraging him a little bit more, but like, I think like changing things up offensively, because just going with the same thing over and over again becomes a bit predictable and clearly has not worked in these matchups. And then I think it does bear the question of like longer term, like can the Lakers address this on the trade market? And I think it's clear that it might not just be the fifth starter. It might need to be a little bit more of a reshuffling of like 2 to 3 players in the rotation that are far more athletic. Now, the Lakers have a couple guys at the end of the bench right now in Jared Vanderbilt and Adu Thero that could check that box. And maybe it's trade for one guy and then one of those guys pops in the rotation. Maybe it's trade for a couple guys and then one of those guys pops in the rotation. But JJ noted pregame, he was asked about Jared Vanderbilt, said that, I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically said that Vando was in some of the Lakers' worst lineups, and the lineup data with Vando on the floor has been pretty bad. And he called Vando an innocent bystander in that. But while I think he was trying to kind of defend Vando, it's still like clearly when since LeBron has returned, Vando's been on just out of the rotation entirely, not even getting playing time in garbage time. So JJ can kind of frame it however he wants, but if we're critically looking at it, like they determined that at least some part of those lineups struggling, and I think he's particularly talking about Vando and Jackson together, which I've mentioned has been problematic. And if you remove Vando from the Jackson minutes, it only gives you a couple of small shifts with Vando next to DeAndre, and I don't think they want to do that either. So I don't know how Vando gets into the rotation. It seems like Thero also for now is on the outskirts as more just a garbage time guy. But the Lakers do have some real athleticism and speed issues, and they do have a couple guys that could help in that regard, though they both come with some offensive concerns. But I think longer term, this has to be something that they potentially address on the trade market, because I focused a lot on the offense, but I would say the defense is also a part of this, where all of those teams were able to run on the Lakers in transition. All those teams were able to beat them to 50-50 balls, offensive rebounds. So the speed deficit did not just show up with the Lakers offense against ball pressure. It showed up defensively as well. And I thought that was apparent tonight. Takeaway number 2, I think is going to be the LeBron acclimation period has been rough. And again, I think this is probably this is the worst LeBron game I can remember since I've been covering the team for 6 seasons. I would assume it's probably the worst LeBron game as a Laker, and one of his worst LeBron games, or one of LeBron's worst games of his career. And that shows you how high the standard is for a bad LeBron game. But 10 points, 3 of 10 shooting, 1 for 4 on threes, 3 for 4 on free throws. Did not grab a rebound, which is pretty shocking for LeBron to not have a rebound in a game he played 31 minutes, and 3 turnovers to 3 assists. So also didn't have the playmaking impact that he's had in previous games. And I think, there's going to be a lot of talk about LeBron in the next couple of days, right? There's going to be a lot of reactions to tonight's loss. People are going to say he lost to Father Time. People are going to say it's over. People are going to say he should retire. And I don't buy any of that. I want to actually bring up the beginning of the last season, because if you guys remember, that first month was rough for LeBron. It was not as rough as now, right? So certainly there's a chance that he has aged or is at a different phase of his career a little bit compared to where he was at last season. But the first month of LeBron last year was still pretty rough, and people were saying similar things. And again, he was more involved in the offense. There was no Luka LeBron was still somewhere between the 1 and 2 option with AD. And, Austin was on the rise, but LeBron was way more involved, and the usage was there. The shot attempts were there. So his numbers were collectively better, but it was a lot of similar things of LeBron struggling to beat guys off the dribble. LeBron isn't playing defense. He's not rotating as the low man. He's not boxing out this and this and this. He's not rotating to shooters. And that was all true. But clearly, LeBron had that little break in early December. He had the talk with JJ after the Miami game. And from that point on, he was an entirely different player who ended up finishing 6th in MVP voting and 6th in All-NBA voting and made All-NBA second team. So and was a big part of LA's second half turnaround and was commanding the defense and all this stuff. So we know what LeBron did last year, but is he going to do that again this year? I can't say with confidence that he is, but I will say with confidence and some cautious optimism here that this is not the LeBron that we're going to see for the rest of the season. I think he is going to bounce back. I think he is going to be better. And, I don't think he could play much worse. And tonight I thought was clearly his worst game since he had been back. Now, I do think it to me does exacerbate. I don't know the numbers off of tonight's game yet, but I do have some real concerns with the Ayton, LeBron, Rui front court defensively. And I think already the Ayton, Rui front court has been pretty subpar defensively. And if you actually look at the numbers, those two as a tandem have been bad defensively together on the floor. You take off either one, you put Rui without DeAndre, much better defensive rating. You put Ayton without Rui, 103 defensive rating entering tonight, which is OKC level defensive rating for DeAndre Ayton lineup. So I've been a proponent already of Ayton and Rui have to probably split up and stagger a bit more just due to some of their defensive limitations with off-ball defense and attentiveness, and just some of the limitations we've seen early. you add in LeBron to that, and it does feel like they're pouring kerosene right now on the Lakers defense. And entering tonight's game, the Lakers with LeBron on the floor had the league's best offense. So that was encouraging. And we've seen the 4-on-3, 3-on-2, LeBron's playmaking at a very, very high level. But they've also had the league's worst defense. And that has been a trend that has continued, continued tonight. And I think it's something they're going to have to really think hard and long about, just because I don't know right now, at least with LeBron's current physical state and some of the physical limitations we've seen, how much you should be playing Ayton, Rui, and LeBron against serious teams. I just don't think that's a viable defensive front court together. And like, I think DeAndre Ayton has done a good job individually, but he is not a Gobert, Wemby that you want to be funneling all the like guys into necessarily. And I do think with some of the limitations there with Rui and LeBron, it does put a lot on Ayton's plate defensively, probably too much on his plate defensively. So I think longer term, like they're going to have to figure that out. Now, Marcus Smart can't stay healthy, so he's dealing with his back thing. I don't know if I thought Marcus should have been the starter. If he's out, availability is the best ability, right? So that is a knock against Marcus, but then you look at Jake and Gabe, and it's like, are Jake and Gabe playing well enough to start? Like, I would say right now, probably not. So the Lakers almost by default kind of have to start Rui, but it's just so problematic, in my opinion, on the defensive end and also on the glass to some degree. Like LeBron and Rui combined for 1 rebound tonight in 54 minutes. And, that's an anomaly for LeBron, but yeah. So, and then final takeaway before we get into the Q&A is a quick road trip preview. So the Lakers are about to head on a very strange road trip, as JJ noted, after the New Orleans game, where they're going West Coast to East Coast. And like typically teams will, especially the West Coast teams, will progressively move east. Like maybe you have a game in Texas that like the Lakers have had stretches where it's like maybe they go to Houston, they go to San Antonio, they go to Dallas, then they go to Atlanta, then they go to like Charlotte or something like that, like a Southeast trip, but starting kind of in the Southwest and moving over that way. Or maybe you start in the Midwest and you go to Minnesota, or you go to Milwaukee, you go to Cleveland, you go to Indiana, then you go to Philly, New York, Boston, whatever. This is just straight up going from LA to Toronto, then going to Boston, then closing it out in Philly. And those are going to be 3 tough games. Each team presents its own challenge. With Toronto, they have a lot of individual offensive firepower, and we've seen teams, it's kind of to me similar to Phoenix, where they have a lot of guys that can ISO and take people off the dribble. But between, of course, the top of the roster, Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram, but then also RJ Barrett. I'm not sure if he's going to be back for that game, but Emmanuel quickly, like they've got a lot of offensive firepower. Then their top 5 defense right now, they also play with a certain pace and a certain verve that I think can challenge the Lakers. So that is a team that's playing really well. And I think that's going to be a really tough front end of a back-to-back. Then they get the privilege of going to Boston, who right now is the number 4 offense in the league and has been shooting a bunch of threes, playing well offensively, and they get to play them on the second night of a back-to-back in, obviously a game that always means more just because it's the Celtics. But like we know, Lakers at Boston has been, how many crazy games have they had there, from the LeBron gets fouled by Tatum and they don't call it, to Lakers win without LeBron and AD, to last year's game, which was a really close game, and then LeBron gets injured in the 4th and Lakers end up losing that game. But like it's been some wild finishes for LA in Boston over the last few years, and I think that one promises to be another one. And then they close things out at Philly. Philly's come back down to earth. They're not playing as well, but on paper they have a lot of the types of play. Like, I don't know who's guarding Tyrese Maxey. I think Tyrese Maxey is way too fast for anybody on this Lakers team. And I really don't know who's going to have any shot at slowing him down. Then you got VJ Edgecombe, Kelly Oubre's playing well, Quentin Grimes off the bench. So that's a quick perimeter oriented team that can give the Lakers some problems as well. So I think this is going to be a really challenging road trip. Now, maybe coming off of this Phoenix loss and them being reminded of their floor, being reminded of some of the bad habits that I think they've accrued really over the course of the season, but especially during the win streak that they've kind of glossed over. Maybe this is a wake up call, and they can come out and come out with the requisite focus and energy and execution. But I think this is going to be a really challenging road trip for them. That, like, on paper, it wasn't the most challenging going into the season or even a couple weeks ago. But I think with how the Lakers have been playing recently, especially defensively, and how each of these teams is playing, I think they all present real problems on the perimeter for LA's defense. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A. Before we do, I'm going to take a quick break for the sponsor of today's show. I will be right back in a minute. If you're looking for the best possible deal on Lakers tickets, look no further than the sponsor of today's video, SeatGeek. With over 35 million downloads, SeatGeek is the #1 ticketing app. There are more than 70,000 events listed on SeatGeek, including concerts, sports, festivals, and more. The NBA, NFL, college football, and college basketball are all underway. I love using SeatGeek, whether it's for USC football tickets or trying to help a friend or family member get the best deal possible on Lakers tickets. And SeatGeek has your back. Each ticket is rated on a scale of 1 to 10, so you're getting a good deal. So look for the green dots. Green means good, red means bad. Plus, every ticket is backed by their buyer guarantee. And of course, I have a code for you guys. You could use code Jovan10 for 10% off your next purchase at SeatGeek. That's 10% off any tickets with promo code Jovan10. Make sure you click the link in the description to download the app and have the code automatically added to your account so you could use it later. Thank you, SeatGeek. All right. Thank you to SeatGeek. Shout out SeatGeek. Let's get into the Q&A. First one here from Jackson. Thank you for the super chat. LeBron was terrible tonight. What do you think, Jovan? Yeah, I mean, I agree. I said it was probably the worst game I've ever seen him play, and definitely the worst game I can remember with him as a Laker. I don't want to dwell too much on it or take too much away from it. Again, like, it's been a bit of a rough acclimation process for LeBron to start. I think the Lakers still don't really know how they want to use him offensively, and there have been stretches and moments it's looked really good, and when he's screening and cutting and posting up and hitting guys on the weak side, and he's already got a really good connection with DeAndre Ayton, has a good connection with Gabe and Jake as weak side shooters. Like, I don't want to overblow this and say he's been terrible the whole time, or he has not ever looked like himself during these first few games, but he obviously is not. Like, I think the most glaring thing to me has been the inability to beat guys off the dribble, and that was something we started to see more of last year, but I think that has stood out. And not just like not beat guys off the dribble, but he's not even looking to try to beat guys off the dribble. So I don't know if part of that's like a physical thing of him still working his way back in the training. He's called it training camp and this and that. So like I don't know the answer to that, but certainly not a good game tonight. I think, again, worst performance of the season, and one of the worst, if not the worst, I can remember from him. Fahim, thank you for the super chat. Prior to tonight, nearly every team has played 2 times the digit games versus plus 500 teams. LA and OKC with fewest at 7-6. LA is now 4-4 in the season and 11-1 versus sub 500. LA legit, or just feasting on inferior teams and interior teams, I guess. Because if you got to slow big, good luck guarding the Lakers. There's certainly an element of, I think the Lakers have benefited from playing some under 500 teams. I think I'd be lying if I didn't say that is factored into part of their hot start. At the same time, I know with the sub 500, or 500 versus sub 500, I assume this is based on the time, like the record at the time played, because obviously that's going to change a lot depending on, like, Portland was an above 500 team at the time that since has become a below 500 team. If you look at the Lakers schedule, though, I think both Minnesota wins were impressive. I think the San Antonio win was impressive, and I think the Milwaukee win was impressive. You could also note LA and Dallas are not, the Clippers and the Mavericks are not as bad as their records, and they both just got their injured stars back in Kawhi and AD. So they have some really, I think, solid wins, especially looking at, I would say, to me, in terms of opponent, Minnesota and San Antonio stand out. Now, the second Minnesota game, no Ant. So if you want to put an asterisk on that, sure. The Lakers were without Luka and LeBron. So I feel like that washes out to some degree. But if you want to say like, okay, they didn't beat a full squad Minnesota team, put that one to the side. They beat them in the second game of the season. They beat them by 18. And you also had that San Antonio game. Like, yes, you can poke holes in all this, right? Like Miami, no Tyler Hero, no Norman Powell. San Antonio, no Fox, no Harper. But then flip it and no LeBron for any of those games, and no Luka in some of these games. So you can play that game if you want to in terms of quality of opponent and this and that. I will note that they have not yet. If I'm doing my power rankings / like contender rankings, I don't think up to this point they've beaten a top 7 team for me in the NBA. I think San Antonio and Minnesota are both right there as top 10 teams for me, but they've not beaten OKC, they've not beaten Denver, they've not beaten Houston, they've not beaten Detroit, they've not beaten New York, they haven't beaten Cleveland. Those are my 6 of my top 7, with the Lakers also in that top 7. Now, they've only played one of those 6 teams. They've not played the other 5. And they did get smoked by OKC by 29 in that one in OKC. So I guess like their record against the very best teams in the league, the teams I consider real conference finals and finals threats, is 0-1 right now. But we will get a larger sample size of potentially a second game against OKC. Another, they're playing 3 times against Denver, 3 times against Houston, then the 2 times against each of the East teams. So the schedule is certainly going to get tougher, and they're going to play those teams, and we will have a clearer picture of where they stand against those teams. Up to this point, they obviously have not played that caliber of opponent outside of the one OKC game, but they've also largely taken care of business. So like, you play the schedule that's in front of you. That also means that a later date, you'll be playing a much tougher schedule, and we could go through like this road trip gets a little tricky, but then you get into like February. February is, you got like New York, Philly, Golden State, OKC, San Antonio, Dallas, and the Clippers. Maybe at that point, like Dallas has been playing better. Maybe they're at a different phase of their season. But you got Orlando and Golden State, and like it gets Denver, New York, Minnesota, Denver, Houston. This stretch of Denver, Houston. All in less than a week, like that in March, that gets crazy. Then they close the season. 2 of their final 6 games are against OKC. So the tough games are coming. It's just happening more so in February, March, and April. And by that point, ideally the Lakers have banked enough wins where even if they lose some of those games, they're still at least like a home court team. But I don't want to. I think it would be disingenuous to say that the Lakers can only beat bad teams or can only beat subpar teams or mediocre teams. At the same time, can they beat what? I'm very interested to see what's their collective record against OKC, Houston, and Denver, and like, can they sniff 500? Like right now, they're set to play those teams 10 times. Can they go 5-5 in those 10 games? Or what's? I think 4-6 is probably a win. Honestly, I think that would probably be like a success against that caliber of opponent, but we shall see, right? So I don't think it's fair to say that yet, but I think my bigger concern is like if they're playing a fast team that's good at ball pressure and good in transition and has a certain level of shooting, can they beat that type of opponent? And to me, OKC is clearly that type of team. I think Houston presents similar physical and speed challenges. So like Detroit is like that. New York is like that to an extent. So like, I do think some of the top teams in the league present real matchup issues for them that concern me. but I don't want to make a blanket statement and say like they can't beat. Like I think Denver is going to have a tough time matching up with them defensively. It's probably just going to be a shootout. It's going to be an offensive off. Once again, shout out to Justin for becoming a member. Gruizito, completely butchered that. I'm sorry. AR's odds of being in the 50, 40, 90 club. So entering tonight, Austin was at 52% field goal percentage, 36% on threes, and 88% on free throws. I think the threes are going to be harder for him. I think he is yet to shoot 40% on threes. Technically shot 39.8% his second season. So if you want to round up and say that was 40%, he's done it once. Otherwise, he's been at 32%, 37%, 38%, 36%. So he is shooting the ball better. And I think he's going to normalize as like a mid to high 30s 3-point shooter. But I think the 40% is going to be an issue for him. I think he should be around 50% overall. And then 90%, he's more of a high 80s guy, maybe sniffing, especially with how many free throws he gets, because he gets so many free throws. It's probably harder for him to hit that 90% on that type of volume. So I would say probably due to both threes and free throws, he won't get it. But I think between the two, he'll be closer on free throws. Keon Park, thank you for the super chat. Game like this where Luka's mentally fragile, frustrated, trying to do everything by himself and succeed as a point getter, fail as a point guard. I wish point guard Braun took over from Luka and distributes the ball better. I would say a silver lining to this is like the Lakers can learn from this. This does not mean this is how they have to play. And I do agree to an extent in terms of, I think Luka is like, I think this is where Luka and LeBron are slightly different in terms of, I think Luka is such they're both basketball geniuses, to be clear, but like I think Luka is such a genius that I think that they go about problem solving in different manners. Luka is more of a shoot. Luka likes to shoot first, get the defense to, like you saw at the end of that first quarter. I mean, Luka, what got buried in this is like Luka had an incredible start to the game, 20 points in the first quarter, was hitting everything, hitting so many contested jumpers. And what starts to happen is you saw like the last couple possessions of the first quarter, they start selling out and trapping and blitzing him at half court. And that starts to get the Lakers going in terms of good looks. So Luka likes to he likes to throw the knockout punch early and get you on your heels, and then start to go in with the technicality and the footwork. And like, I guess the boxing analogy here would be like, that's when he's playmaking for others. LeBron is much more measured in terms of he's trying to feel the game out and see how teams or, opponents' defenses are going to respond to certain things. And then he's calculating, okay, should I be is this more of a scoring game for me? Is this more of a playmaking game? Like, I do think LeBron likes to take more of what the defense is giving rather than dictating the terms of engagement. Luka's much more dictate the terms of engagement. I'm going to get mine early, and then I'm going to break your will. And then once you sell out against me, that's when I'm going to spray the ball all over the floor. So similar results in terms of winning, in terms of statistics, when you look at like their respective careers, but obviously it's just a little bit of a different approach between the two. So I say that to say, I do think Luka tonight aired more on the side of I'm cooking early. They can't guard me. We're in trouble. I'm going to try and shoot my way out of this. And he did drop 38. He did go 15 to 26, an efficient scoring night. But the 5 assists to 9 turnovers obviously was emblematic of he did not get to that next level for him of, creating his own to create generating his own looks in offense to create looks for his teammates. He did not do that at the level that we're accustomed to and that he pretty much does every single night. Now, the thing here with LeBron, though, is like, I just don't know where, like, LeBron's been passing the ball well out of the post. Obviously, the hit aheads and transition opportunities he's been excelling in as well. But I don't know if LeBron right now can physically just bring the ball up, run the offense, and be like a high usage player. I don't like, we've obviously seen him do that for decades, but the version we've seen so far to start the season, I don't know if he's physically there yet. Now, does that mean he can't get there or won't get there? No, I'm not saying that. I just think he might need a little bit more time to get back to that. But I agree with the premise in terms of not handing the keys over to LeBron. The keys are in Luka's hands, as they should be. He's an offense unto himself. He's in the MVP mix. I don't want to overreact to Luka's performance tonight. It's more so, I think there are ways to integrate and acclimate LeBron more. And I think that needs to be something that the Lakers really hone in on going into this road trip and over the next couple of days. Next one from James Wilson. Thank you for the super chat. Hey, JB, I know Smart wasn't available, but on a game where where we were seriously lacking perimeter defense, what did Vanderbilt do to be in the coach's doghouse? SMH. So I mentioned Vando a little bit earlier. According to JJ, it was more of a rotation crunch and lineup data. And some of the lineup data is not, well, a lot of the lineup data has not been positive with Vando. I felt like it was a little bit of cover from JJ in terms of just saying like he thinks Vando's offense just too limiting, too concerning to play him serious minutes. And, I think specifically the Vando Jackson minutes have been problematic. So I continue to say like that does leave very small gaps in the game for Vando to play. And clearly, I think the thing that's been more surprising to me is that Dalton has been somehow elevated into the rotation when I don't think like Dalton and Maxey, to me, Maxey had the stretch at the end of the road trip. And the beginning or first half of this win streak, Maxey had some nice moments. So I get that to an extent, but overall, now that we've seen a little bit more of Maxey, I think it's tough to justify in a vacuum Maxey and Dalton playing more than Vando. At the same time, to me, it's kind of similar to the starting lineup situation where there's no great answer. So sure, you could play Vando, but you are going to struggle offensively. And there is enough data now that the offense really, teams just don't guard him. They pack the paint and he does not make them pay. And that is, for a guy in JJ who really prioritizes spacing and shooting and offense, that is often a deal breaker. And that is why I've been low on Vando's fit with this team, specifically for JJ's sensibilities and proclivities, because Vando is not a JJ type of guy. I think that's simply what it comes down to. The things that JJ wants and prioritizes are not the things that Vando does. And I think, unfortunately, up to this point in the season for Vando, he is not defended at a level that he is impossible to keep off the floor, or you know what I'm saying? He's not defended at a level where JJ is well, I just have to play him. I don't think he's been that unequivocally excellent on the defensive end. So that's where I keep coming back to with the Vando situation. I get it. I don't agree with it. I think he, at least now, especially during the win streak, you could tweak things. I will note, and I wish I noted this earlier, JJ did say he's going to look at everything, including the starting lineup, the rotation, and the scheme. And coming off of this type of loss, he's going to consider making some changes. So we'll see. Maybe Vando gets back into the rotation. Wannabe GM's podcast. Thank you for the super chat. Would you do connect Gabe Maxey in a second for Terrence Mann, Daron Sharp, and Haywood Highsmith? Wonder if there's any sense in taking on Mann's deal if you could get the other pieces for less. Yes, I would do this in a heartbeat. I think you get better at all three positions. You upgrade from Maxey to Sharp. You upgrade from, take your pick in terms of connect and Gabe to Mann and Haywood. I would assume that Brooklyn would want more. Yes, you're getting off the longer term money of Mann, but I don't know that it's that high enough of a number or that detrimental of a contract to get rid of. I think Sharp and Haywood in particular would have more value than this on the open market. So that's the other factor that I feel there's two factors we always have to keep in consideration anytime we're talking about Lakers making a trade is what does the other team want and what's their general goal? And that's why I think looking at Phoenix, I didn't do the Dylan Brooks audition breakdown, but I would not trade that guy right now if I'm Phoenix. You have no incentive to trade Dylan Brooks unless you're blown away with an offer. And similar, Andrew Wiggins in Miami. So you always have to think about what does the other team want, and then you also have to think about what is the potential price or what is the potential market from the rest of the league. So in a vacuum, could you maybe make a case for this type of trade on the Brooklyn side of just like get off man's money, get a second, get an interesting young player in Dalton, like maybe. But I do think if they made Sharp and Haywood available, they could probably get more than just expiring money and a second. I don't know like how much more. I'm not saying they're getting a first, and I don't even know if they'd get like multiple seconds. Maybe they get like a couple seconds, but I think they could probably get a better or more interesting player than Dalton and probably better draft capital. So I think Brooklyn probably says no here. Rich, thank you for the super chat. Needed a lot more from Braun, and this was a Vando game. Yeah, I mean, I've talked about Vando, so I'm not going to harp on that. And I've also talked a bit about Braun. Like, I think better days are coming, but in the meantime, until those days are here, it's going to be pretty rough defensively. And that's been the biggest. I think the two big concerns I would say with LeBron up to this point have been the defense and the inability to beat people off the dribble. And those are two things that the Lakers are going to need from him. Like, if anything, we were talking about earlier in the season, can LeBron take a step back offensively and be better defensively? And that has not panned out early in the season. And then obviously beating guys off the dribble, that's been, a little bit of a concern here. Gary Singh, thank you for the super chat. Lakers' entire practices should be defensive drills. No energy on D. AR struggled on Gillespie. Luka should get teammates involved earlier in games. They need. I mean, I'm with you on just about everything. The defense was, and one thing that, and again, I don't want to pile on LeBron because I think enough people are going to do that, and I don't even think that this is like largely LeBron's fault. But I mentioned that during the 7-game win streak, second in offense, 12th in defense. If you take out the first two games, which were without LeBron, and in my opinion, not only their two best defensive games of the win streak, but arguably their two best defensive performances of the season, or at least in that conversation. The Milwaukee game was the best defensive performance, but the New Orleans game was also in that mix for number two. If you actually look at the last 5 games entering tonight, which is since LeBron returned, they were 20th in defense. They were a bottom 10 defense, and that has been, but they were still second in offense. So if you, like, since LeBron has returned, they basically have been an unstoppable offense that is not good defensively. And that tonight, it ended up being they were very bad defensively, and they were also subpar offensively outside of the first quarter. So that's a recipe for disaster. And the defense is, like, right now, that continues to be the thing that I'm most concerned with overall. Is I just don't think they've had many encouraging stretches of defense, and like some of the early season numbers can be like their defense rating was really swayed by the New Orleans and Milwaukee games. But if you go on like an individual basis of their individual defensive performances, most of them have been bad, and that's concerning. So I agree. I don't even know if it's fixable, to be completely honest, just with like practice. I think that's probably a larger roster question. AR did struggle with Gillespie tonight. I do think Gillespie hit some insane shots. He hit 8 threes, and at least half of those were off the dribble, but certainly Austin got cooked. Gabe got cooked. The Lakers perimeter defense entirely got cooked. And with Luka, like, I think Luka plays the way he plays. So they were tied at the end of the first. They had, like, the crazy thing with this game was the Lakers actually went up 6 early in the second, and it looked like the Lakers were going to pull away and distance themselves. Then, so they go on like I think it was like a 6-0 run to take a 6-point lead. Then Phoenix responds with a 7-0 run to regain the lead. Lakers call timeout. Then that run continues. Phoenix closes the half on a 31-11 run over the final 7 minutes to take that 14-point lead into halftime. But it was just an insane run for Phoenix to close that first half, and then it continued into the third quarter. But I'm with you on basically all these. I think Luka's going to play the way he's going to play. I don't know if you're going to see a material change in that, but I think how the Lakers counter this ball pressure should not be just Luka try to cook it himself. So that part I agree with. Like, I think they need to figure out some better counters here. Peter, thank you for the super chat. OKC laughing. LAL lose to Suns without Allen and Booker. Thank you for, I should have mentioned earlier, no Grayson Allen either, who's averaging 18 a game, shooting 43% on threes. So that was a big loss for them. He was out with an illness. Denver loses to Mavs, even though they miss Brown and Gordon. Houston loses to Utah. OKC winning by 75. Did OKC win by 75 tonight? It's so believable that I actually believe it. They did not play tonight, but basically win by 75 every night. Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, my West tier is OKC in its own tier, and then tier 2 is Denver, Houston, and the Lakers. And I think all three of those teams have I think Denver probably has the best shot against OKC, but I think they all range from like puncher's chance to decent chance against OKC. And I think any of those would be fascinating series: Denver, LA, Houston, Denver. But it's all try to jockey to not be on the OKC side of the West bracket, and whoever gets that 2 or 3 seed is going to be in a much better spot than whoever gets the 4 seed, because whoever gets the 4 seed is probably losing in round 2. Gary Singh, thank you for the super chat. Thero needs to get minutes. Love his defensive upside. Yeah, I don't disagree. I think this stretch actually would have been a nice stretch because of the level of competition to see Thero in more of a rotation role. I think it's a little tougher to throw him out against a Toronto or a Boston or a Philly in hostile road environments. And, you know, I don't know. I think this is an area that JJ maybe overthought it a little bit with Thero in terms of just not giving him a real shot. Like we saw it a little bit in the Milwaukee game that he returned for, but otherwise he's basically been a garbage time player. And I would just like to see a larger sample size with him. At the same time, to JJ in JJ's defense here, he has, anytime he's talked about Thero, he has talked about him in a development sense. So, you know, sometimes when we have these rotation discussions or lineup discussions, like we can think something should happen or we can want something to happen. We can try to wish cast it, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen. And all signs have pointed from the summer till now to Thero not being a rotation player under JJ, and JJ just not viewing him that way. So as frustrating as it can be for some, I know a lot of people want to see him play. A lot of people believe he could help. I think like the coaching staff deserves some benefit of the doubt here. It's, you know, I think JJ's largely coached a really good season and was a pretty good coach last year. So I'm sure he has his reasons for why he's not playing. I don't know that I necessarily agree with them, but again, I continue to harp on, like, anytime JJ has a decision to make in the rotation, he errs on the side of offense, shooting, spacing, and smaller players. That's just his tendencies. Ali, thank you for the super chat. Any under the radar trade rumors? Let's go all in. Nothing new, but when I have something new, you guys will know for sure. But I think that this does make, you know, like the Lakers are in an interesting spot here where we have turned the calendar. We are technically December 1st. For some of you right now, it's December 2nd. But we're 2 weeks away, less than 2 weeks away from some free agents being eligible to be traded on December 15th. Then there's the next wave on January 15th, and really like late January around Christmas time or right after Christmas time kicks off trade season. So we are now within like less than, let's say, like 4 weeks from, there will probably be a trade in the next 4 weeks. I would say probably a smaller trade, but some type of trade in the next 4 weeks. So we are knocking on the door of trade season here. And it is going to be interesting to see, like, if the Lakers, if they go like 1-2 on this road trip, and let's just say they go 1-2 and then lose to San Antonio, like, I think at that point it's like either make a move and try to address some of the weaknesses, or do you just stand pat and ride out this roster and see where it goes? I know what I would do. I would make the move and I would be more aggressive, but realistically, I still think we're at least 3-ish weeks away from anything happening. So as that develops and as we get a better sense of who's available, you guys will be the first to know. Mr. Laker, do not see a question here, but I appreciate the super chat. Mo Love, Thank you for the super chat, just for not having gambling sponsors. Yeah, I mean, to be completely honest, I have passed up money. I've passed up gambling sponsors, and I don't say that as like a martyr or some hero, but I know you guys have been very anti-gambling. So I've had a couple of opportunities to partner with gambling people. And I myself, I'm not like inherently like morally against gambling. I just don't gamble myself. So everything that I promote or agree to is either something I have used or something that I have used since partnering with them. But I don't just partner just to partner. So whether it's SeatGeek or Rocket Money or Mint Mobile or some of the other sponsorships that I've, Viore, like I've used all those companies or have, used them since partnering with them. So that's something I'm big on. Like I'm not, it is a business and I do need to make a living, but at the same time, I do care about the audience and what you guys care about and what's important to you. So yeah, I have been turning down some gambling situations. Dub9 Raider, thank you for the super chat. Realistically, how difficult are home and home back-to-backs? Does that factor in at all here? I feel like they looked lazy, tired, and disinterested. I would argue a home back-to-back is the easiest back-to-back of all, just because you get to sleep in your bed. You don't, the biggest thing is you don't have to travel, right? Because there's different variants of a back-to-back. There's like a double road back-to-back, right? Like they're about to have that Toronto, Boston. There's like a home road back-to-back or a road home back-to-back where maybe it's like they go up to San Francisco, play the Warriors, and they come back for a game in LA, or the inverse. They're in LA, they go up to San Francisco, they go up to Sacramento, or could even go further. That's a much tougher back-to-back, or a road trip back-to-back is a much tougher back-to-back than a home back-to-back. Now, sometimes at home, you do have more distractions, right? You got your partner, you got your kids, you got your friends, maybe you have family members in town to come watch the game. It is the holiday season. I'm sure guys had people in town for Thanksgiving. So there can be some distractions at home that you don't necessarily have on the road. At the same time, as someone who has lived this life for the past 7 years and lived the travel life, I 100% would rather do a home back-to-back in LA than a Milwaukee, New Orleans back-to-back, or a Boston, Toronto back-to-back, or even an LA, San Francisco back-to-back. Like, not having to fly and travel is such a big factor. I think with most games, which is why teams tend to be worse on the road, but specifically with a back-to-back, like, because the thing you have to remember too is like, especially if you're traveling on a back-to-back, like they don't, at least for me, like my strategy when I was traveling on the road for back-to-backs was I would book the latest possible flight to get into the second city. So like it often was not that late, but it was maybe like 11 or 12. And that was the absolute latest I could fly, get into the new city, go get my luggage, get to the airport, or get to the hotel, change, and then go to like straight to the game often. They don't do that. They actually go straight from the arena to the airport. And like, yes, they're traveling in first class and private and all that stuff. But like, from a body perspective, they're often traveling at 2, 3, 4 in the morning. And then you get there, you land, you get on the bus, you go to the hotel, then you have to somehow unwind and try to get some sleep and rest for the next day. So I actually think in some ways it's harder on them from like a sleep schedule perspective rather than me, who after I go live or write my story or whatever, I can go to sleep and try to sleep in as late as possible to make that flight. So, certainly, I think the back-to-back was an element here. I don't want to deny that, but I do think a home back-to-back is the easiest back-to-back, and I don't really think it's close. Mac Roblox, thank you for the super chat. This game proves again the Lakers defense is below mid and they need better defenders. Start Marcus Smart. LeBron did poorly this game. If he doesn't shape up, then he should start on the bench. Well, let's start in reverse order here. LeBron is not coming off the bench. That's not going to happen. So Luka's not coming off the bench, of course. Austin's not coming off the bench. LeBron's not coming off the bench, and I don't envision really a realistic scenario unless they traded for like an all-star center that DeAndre Ayton comes off the bench. So I'll put that to rest now. 100% agree with your first statement. And really, there's been nothing I've seen in this first month and we'll say 5 weeks of the season that has changed my opinion of the Lakers being a below average defense. If anything, I've probably grown a little bit more pessimistic of the Lakers defense. After tonight, they dropped to 18th. Like, I think they'd be really fortunate right now. As long as they don't make a move. If they make a move, it's a different story, and that changes how I view their defense. If they stand pat, I do think this is largely a league average at best defense, and that's probably your offense has to be so astronomically good to offset that to be a true contender. So as things stand, I do have real concerns with the defense. And I do agree that they probably need 1 to 2 defensive upgrades in the rotation, primarily first with the starter, the 5th starter spot, and then maybe with another bench player. The start Marcus, like I'm still on board, I guess, with starting Marcus, to be clear. If this dude's dealing with a back issue and he's already had a couple of nicks and knacks this season, we know about his extensive injury history. I still think there's a way you could start him and probably play him 20 to 24 minutes. So you could like limit the minutes. And I know some people have noted like, okay, you can't play him 30 minutes tonight. All right. But you could Keith Bogans him. You can play him fewer minutes as a starter. That said, if he's going to be in and out of the lineup, you're going to have so much disruption with your continuity and constantly shuffling in Rui or Jake or whoever. And maybe Gabe is like the closest like for like to Marcus. But still, like you don't really want to have a revolving starting lineup if you can avoid it. So if he can get healthy here and stay healthy for a sustained period, that's maybe a different conversation. But I think for now, Marcus is probably going to be coming off the bench. Mr. Laker 19, I think this is the one you had said earlier. Talk about LeBron and JJ prioritizing his streak over winning, or are you clutch purchased? I am not clutch purchased. I'm going to assume, I don't know what other people are saying, but I just said this was probably the worst game of LeBron's career. So I don't think, maybe the clutch fans will come for me after saying that. I don't know. But my pushback on this is like the game was over when LeBron went for the streak. Like they didn't really change his rotation. Like maybe they kept him in a little bit longer, but he was pretty much playing the same amount of minutes that he always plays. Now, you could argue that in an ideal world, they maybe pulled the plug even earlier in the fourth. Like I thought it was clear. I mean, to me, it was clear like 4 minutes left in the third that this game was over, but you could say like 8 minutes left in the fourth. At that point, what's the point of having Luka out there, Austin out there, LeBron out there? Like just bench the guys. Of course, the LeBron streak was a thing and they called the timeout. I thought they were potentially going to pull the guys. They didn't. They kept him out there and they started calling his number more and more, trying to get him to the streak. So that's not the Lakers were down by 20 points at that point. That's not the reason they lost this game. And I don't agree with that framing of the situation. Now, can you say it's maybe a little silly and like they should have just taken the L and moved on and let the streak die? Like, you could argue that if you wanted to, but the streak is clearly important to LeBron. And I think if it was a close game, I think where I would criticize it, in my opinion, would be if this was like a close game, or maybe the Lakers were on a comeback and they got it to like 6 points, 8 points, but there was like 4 minutes left in the game and they start force feeding LeBron to try and get him the points. That's where I would say, okay, that's like clearly detrimental to the Lakers offense, the Lakers chances of winning this game. But the game was already over at that point. The Lakers had a couple of little stretches where they went on like mini runs, never really got, I believe, under 14. It was over. So, if you want to criticize LeBron or JJ or diss on them for that's your prerogative. But I don't think that was a real factor here. And yeah. Mac Roblox, thank you for the super chat. Hopefully they trade Connect for Keon Ellis soon. That's the Laker fan trade of the season. Clearly at this point, everyone wants Keon Ellis on LA. I get it. I think he would help. And yeah, I would do that. I mean, I think you got to throw in at least a second round pick, if not more, but I would do that in a second. I just don't know if Sacramento's going to do that. Sarah says, really felt the absence of Marcus tonight. Yeah, that's something that, like, I think this was a closer game. I probably would have touched on that a little bit more. But certainly, I would say really the last couple nights, they felt the absence of Marcus. I thought phases of, stretches of the New Orleans game, you felt his absence as well. But tonight is a night that I think defensively, with his energy, with just his leadership, his communication, like they missed him in every regard. Gary Singh, again, looking for a super chat. Lakers passing up good looks result in turnovers. Yeah, I mean, I thought they sped them up. And that's, again, a trend in some of these losses for the Lakers is they get sped up in ways that ultimately are harmful for them. And then they start to pass up good looks. Then they start to overthink it. Then they start to, someone passes up a three, tries to put the ball on the ground, gets stripped, or then tries to create a drive and kick opportunity, gets stolen. Just like a comedy of errors, to be quite frank. So yeah, I agree. Peter, thank you for the super chat. Do you believe OKC will beat Golden State's 73-9 record? Okay, no, but I think they're going to win 70 games. I think they're probably going to go 70-12 would be my prediction. I think whether it's due to injury or boredom or at some point it just not really making sense to keep, like, they might win 70 games and maybe no one else in the league wins 60 games. So like at some point late in the season over the final few weeks, it might just be like a resting people situation. And for example, they played the Lakers twice in the final 6 games. If they have a 15 game, 12 game lead over the number 2 seed, you might just sit your guys, and there's a balancing act to it, right? Because you want to maintain a certain rhythm and you don't want your guys to be rusty going into the playoffs, but they might selectively rest guys a little bit that caught, like if you're going for 74, you need to prioritize every single game. And we've since heard the Warriors basically admitting that like they probably shouldn't have tried to get 73 wins and that might have had some impact on them in the playoffs and ultimately losing in the finals to the Cavs. So I think they're gonna be in the mix. I would not be like stunned if they did, especially when you look at how bad, Washington's 2 wins, Indiana's 2 wins, Brooklyn's 2 wins, Charlotte's 2 wins for them. The Pelicans is multiple wins, the Clippers, Kings, Utah. Like right there, I just named 8 teams that across those 8 teams might be 20 to 24 wins, depending on how many total games they play those teams. Just right there. Like they might go like 24-0 against the bottom 8 teams in the league. And then even at like a playoff level, they're beating all these teams. So it's crazy. I think what I will say is I think they'll break their own record for point differential and break the net rating record. So I do think they're going to post the best net rating and point differential of all time, but I think they probably top out around 70 wins. Wanna Be GM's podcast. Ideal Nets package, oddly have useful pieces. Yeah, so I was listening to Zach Lowe and Mo Dakhil today, and they were doing a sellers buyers breakdown a little bit, and I thought Zach had a really good breakdown of it, as he always does, where I think there's going to be more buyers than sellers right now, and some of the teams that have pieces to sell, they're not like the sexiest pieces to the point of being worth like a first or like worth like a giant haul for certain players or certain pieces. So the Nets are, to me, are kind of in that mix of, I think, Nick Claxton, probably not for the Lakers, but there are several teams where Nick Claxton would make a lot of sense. Highsmith, Terrence Mann, and Zaire Williams, they're on Sharp. Like the Nets do have a lot of individual pieces that I think could help a rotation. I think the challenge for the Lakers is that like they're probably more of a team that would want like valuable seconds or some interesting young players. Like, I mean, if I'm the Nets, I'm asking about Adu. I'm trying to get Thero in any like, okay, you want Haywood Highsmith? Make a win now trade and give me Adu Thero, and I'll give you Haywood Highsmith. Like, that's how I'd be approaching it if I'm the Nets. And then if you're the Lakers, you have to make that calculus of who's going to, like, it's undeniable Haywood Highsmith is a better player right now than Adu Thero, and he would help the Lakers more right now to potentially win a championship or compete for a championship. It's just like making that calculus of like 2 years from now and 4 years from now, how does this move? Like, what is the ripple effect? How does this play out? But I think I would take it. If I'm prioritizing guys on the Nets, I'd probably prioritize Highsmith and Sharp to the earlier question. I just don't know if just expirings and a second and Dalton is enough. Like, I think Dalton has in general played better, but it's not like he's been playing well or good. So I think Dalton's trade value is largely where it was this summer. Like, maybe it's nudged up a little bit, but he was viewed as a negative asset going back to the summer. I think he's still kind of eye of the beholder. Maybe some teams see some potential in him. Maybe it's the Nets. I don't know. But I don't know if what the Lakers currently have is going to move the needle enough. Darian, thank you for the super chat. Hi, Jovan. The thumbnails on losses always get me. Haha, makes it slightly better. Prediction record for the road trip. Big fan of your work. Goat emoji. I appreciate it. I will say 2-1. I think that I think they beat Philly, and I think they lose one of the two ends of the back-to-back. Now, I don't know. You guys are probably not going to like this. If I had to guess, I would say like they have a spirited bounce back against Toronto, and maybe that's like a close-ish game that they win, and then they lose at Boston. And it's not because it's Boston. It's because it's the second night of a back-to-back. And I think the Toronto game is going to be tough, and it is going to be physical and demanding. And there's also going to be a level of speed and energy expended in that game, higher than the normal. Also, first game, East Coast road trip. So, like, if they respond in the way I think they will respond against Toronto, I think there's a natural letdown possibility in the Boston game. We also don't know. LeBron's probably going to rest one of the two, I would assume. I don't, like JJ said, at some point they're trying to build him up to playing back-to-backs, but that did not seem to be 3 days from now he's going to play in a back-to-back. So, based on that, I think that will impact it as well in terms of like which game do the Lakers prioritize having LeBron for. So I think they will split the back-to-back. I will tentatively say beat Toronto, lose to Boston, but could easily be the other way around where maybe the Phoenix stink lingers into the Toronto game, and then maybe they have a positive response against Boston sort of as like, okay, we need to break out of this. And then I do think they'll beat Philly to close out the trip. But look, I will say I'm going 2-1, but between so that's optimistic. Between 3-0 and 0-3, I do think this is closer to an 0-3 trip. So despite me picking actually a positive record, I would say if you told me they're going to go 0-3 or 3-0, I would lean more on the 0-3 side with some of the matchup issues in some of these matchups. And I feel like them not playing their absolute best basketball right now. But I will take the optimistic viewpoint here, and I do think they split the back-to-back and beat Philly. All right, going to go about 5 more minutes here. Doggy says Philly will win. We aren't stopping JV and Maxey. I think the flip side to this is they're probably going to put a lot of Grimes and Oubre on Luka, and I think Luka's going to have a big, I was going to say 35. 35 is like Luka in his sleep, but I could see Luka having a 40 to 45 point game against Philly. They're not good defensively, and they have not been playing well recently. I do think JV and Maxey are both going to go off. I'm not going to deny that, but I think I could also see Austin going off, and so we'll see. I think that's probably going to be some sort of shootout. I'm not saying like the Lakers are definitively going to win. I'm not saying they're going to blow them out, because the Lakers, I've really struggled blowing teams out up to this point in the season, in large part because of their defense. So it's certainly a chance they lose that game, and maybe Maxey drops 40 himself, and that's how Philly wins. But I do think Luka's going to have a giant game. Luka for MVP. Hey, Jovan, JJ said he's considering making changes to the rotation starting lineup. What do you think he will do, and what do you think other than starting Marcus? So, I mean, the question here is Marcus even available for the road trip? Like JJ said he's day-to-day, but that he's had this issue that's been flaring up, and JJ had similar issues with his back, and he'd be out like 1 to 2 weeks. So that gave me some pause in terms of Marcus potentially returning. I do think he probably returns on the road trip, but it's unclear as of right now. I could see, I mean, some people aren't going to like this. I mean, does he give Gabe a shot? Like, I have not seriously considered Gabe as a fifth starter candidate, but when LeBron missed last night's game, Gabe started. Gabe started at the beginning of the season. He seems to be ahead of Jake in the starting pecking order. Like, if you told me Marcus can't start because of the injury concerns, I would probably go Jake. But maybe he goes Gabe, and maybe that's the adjustment. I also would not be surprised if Vando is back in, just to kind of see how he looks in the new rotation. But I'm not sure because again, like I think JJ, he's already done several things that I have not agreed with. Like I do not agree with Rui starting. I think he's been too reliant on Gabe. I think he's probably underplayed Jake a little bit. And I get trying Dalton and Maxey over Vando based on how Vando was playing, especially on that road trip. But I think I would have gone back to Vando, or at least I'd be a little bit more experimental with the back end of the rotation, where I don't think Maxey or Dalton have played well enough to like earn a firm rotation spot. So I would like to see, okay, try Maxey and Dalton tonight. Didn't work or underwhelming. Okay. Tomorrow night, trying Vando, trying Adu, or maybe even like not going all in on like one side of the ball, right? Because Dalton and Maxey bring the shooting, even though Maxey has been a low volume guy, and then Adu and Vando bring the defense, the athleticism. So I would maybe stagger that and try to pair those. All right, tonight let's play Dalton and Vando, and then tomorrow night let's play Maxey and Adu, and like just see different combinations. But it does feel like he gets kind of stuck or set in a certain rotation, and that's what he will ride or die with it, as we saw in Game 4 last season. Connor Phillips, is Dalton's first round contract not also just larger than Bronny's? I don't know if this is in relation to. Okay, I guess this. I entered a conversation. There's a battle going on in the chat. I'm gonna sidestep this one. Angelo Torres, thank you for the super chat. What scheme changes do you think JJ will slash should make? I think the Lakers have to switch less. That's been, or be more selective with the switching and or more aggressive with the switching. So what I mean by that is a couple of things. I think you should not just switch just to switch, because that does allow the opponent to dictate the matchups. And I just don't think the Lakers have the defensive personnel to excel in that type of scheme long term. The other component, though, with this is we've talked about soft switching versus hard switching. And a lot of times what the Lakers do is soft switching, which is they're a bit passive with the switch and they often go under. And what that allows is pull up threes or just really walking into an uncontested or semi-contested three. And I think that continues to happen often, like above the break, of course, more so than in the corners. But like Gillespie had several of those tonight, but going through pretty much nightly, there's like 2 to 4 3-pointers or jumpers at a minimum. And I'm probably being conservative here, that are just the Lakers had a soft switch or botched the switch, botched the communication with the switch, and someone gets an uncontested jumper. So that I think needs to be shorn up. I think in general, they also probably need to be a little less compact with their shell in terms of, I think they sometimes sell out against shooters to such a degree that it makes it harder to make that rotation, and they don't have the athletes or the speed to make that rotation. But then it also just generates a bunch of open looks. So I think that was a component tonight where Phoenix got into an early rhythm and they just carried that momentum into a blowout. So I think it should start largely on the defensive end rather than the offensive end. On the offensive end, I think I would like to see more LeBron on the ball. Not necessarily when Luka's out there, because I think they're going to funnel the offense through Luka as they do. But in those LeBron Austin groups with the second unit, can you get LeBron activated more on the ball? In general, I'd like to see the offensive organization increase. I know that's something Cranjus always tracks, and it's been on a downward trajectory. So it does feel like they've gotten by a little bit recently with some, like they've regressed in the mean with their shooting. So there's been a little bit of like, it almost doesn't matter what we run, we're going to make the shot because we have this elite shot creation and scoring and playmaking. And now we have elite shooting for like a multi-game stretch. So that's where you hit the Death Star of impossible offense to defend. That's kind of how LA's been winning some of these games, is just basically outscoring people because they're so good offensively. But the issue is when you run into a night where you're not making shots or an opponent who can disrupt you the way that Phoenix did, how do you counter that? And how do you reorganize into sets and actions and actually running a functional offense? That's, I think, the next level for LA to get to offensively. So those are some of the switches, Freudian slip there on both sides of the ball. Thomas, the 1 through 5 switching just takes away what Vando gives us on defense. Yeah, I mean, I would argue to a degree it takes away what Thero gives you on defense. It takes away what Marcus gives you on defense. I think the 1 through 5 switching, which again, it depends on the night, depends on the lineup, whether they go 1 through 5 or 1 through 4. But it makes sense if you have versatile multi-positional defender. Like, the example I've used that I know is like JJ's North Star is like the 2024 Celtics. Okay, well, if you're passing Drew Holiday off to Derek White, off to Jason Tatum, off to Jaylen Brown, sure. Like, those are all clear plus defenders who could defend multiple positions. And yes, are some of them better than others? Sure, but you're not targeting any of those guys. And similar with OKC, like teams try to target Shea, but Shea's actually a good defender. And he is the worst defender in their starting group and like probably the top 7 of their rotation. But he's not really a guy that you could just target relentlessly. So it's like if you're passing Lou Dort off to Shea, off to J-Dub, off to Chet, it's like you're not really getting an advantage. Or if you are, the rest of the defense is so good enough to help prop that player up or execute whatever scheme you're running. So the Lakers just don't have that type of defense. And if you're passing off Rui to Luka to Austin to LeBron, I mean, it's got to pick your poison. Like, which one do you want to attack, right? And then even if that player does a good job with the initial on-ball defense, there's still the over the top shot making. And then even if that player executes in terms of like funneling to a certain spot, you have to have the confidence that that player is going to make the rotation and make the right decision in terms of like the help defense. And Lakers help defense has been all over the place. So yeah, there's like multiple layers to it. But I do agree that, especially with Vando in particular, the Lakers' propensity for switching does negate some of Vando's strengths. Joey says, I'm tired. It's 12 a.m. Yes, I am tired as well. And I will be going live once tomorrow and then also recording a new episode of Great Western Forum. So going to go live around probably 4 or 5 p.m. tomorrow with State of the Lakers, 10 storylines at the 20 game mark. So be on the lookout for that. But that will do it for tonight's show. Thank you all for rocking with me for over an hour and a half. Those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. Let's get those likes up. And if you are watching this deep into the show and have not yet subscribed, I don't know what you're doing, but please consider doing so. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Again, I'll be back tomorrow, as in Tuesday, December 2nd. In the afternoon, probably around 4 or 5 p.m. Going to go live for about an hour and a half, breaking down Lakers storylines up to this point in the season, particularly games 11 to 20. And then we'll do some Q&A. And then later in the night, I will be recording Great Western Forum with Pete and Anthony. But appreciate you guys. And I will talk to you all very soon. Shout out to the Late Night Gang.